Hi everyone. Today we're going to focus on solving radical equations. So it's not too bad, but we need to define what it is, and then we're going to try and solve a bunch of them. But then we're going to have to figure out something that is called an extraneous solution. So we're going to solve equations involving radicals. So let's define what that is. So a radical equation is when there is an equation that has a variable in the radicand part of our radical. So in other words, the variable is underneath the radical. Okay, so this is going to be an equation where the variable is part of the radicand. Okay, meaning it's under the radical. Okay, for example, the square root of 3x equals 12 would be a radical equation. But the square root of 4 equaling x is not, because x is not underneath the radical. All right, so we have some steps to help us out to determine or to help us solve the radical equation. So we have an example here. We have the square root of 3x, then add 3 equals equal to 12. So our first step is always to isolate the radical. Okay, so we want that radical to be completely by itself. So you have to think of like your solving techniques to get that by itself. So in this particular case, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. Now, sometimes we may need to divide. Sometimes we may need to do both. So depending on the problem will determine what process you're going to use. So we have the square root of 3x is equal to 9. Right, so our second step is that we're going to square both sides in this particular problem. Okay, now the reason why we're going to do that is because squaring a square root, they cancel each other out. All right, now if it was a cube root, we would want to cube both sides. If it was the fourth root, we would want to take it to the fourth power. So whatever the index is, that is the power that we want to raise our radical both sides to. So we're going to square these. And remember, you have to do it to both, rules of math. Do it to one side, you got to do it to the other. So what happens is that you're going to end up with 3x is equal to 81. All right, now you're just going to solve for the variable. Okay, in this case, we're going to divide both sides by 3. And we're going to get x is equal to 27. All right, but we're not done. Because we've changed the equation and we created an equivalent equation by squaring both sides of the equation, we always check your solution. Okay. All right, so what does that mean? That means I'm going to take 27, I'm going to put it back in for x and see if my answer is actually 12. So I'm going to come back over here and go square root of 3 times 27, then plus 3, and say, hey, does that equal 12? So 3 times 27 is 81, plus 3. Again, big question mark, does that equal 12? So 9 plus 3. And we do get equal to 12. So our solution of 27 is correct. So we always want to go back and check our solutions. Now, one of the things that could happen as we're checking our solution is we could get an extraneous solution. Now, I believe we talked about this before, but we want to define it as a solution to the equivalent equation of the original equation. Okay, so this is a solution that we might get when we square both sides. So this is a solution to the equivalent equation, but not a solution to the original problem. Okay, so if I did this problem up here where we got a solution of 27, and I went back and I checked, and when we did the problem, remember we were supposed to get 12. If our solution wasn't 12, then we would consider that 27 extraneous, because it is not a solution of the original equation. All right, so we have a whole slew of problems here. Let's try this one. So I'm going to do the evens with you, and then I have the odds so you can check your work. All right, so we're going to divide this guy by 3 because remember our first step is to isolate our radical. Okay, so we get the square root of x is equal to 6. Square both sides. We're going to get 36. So the question is, does the square root 3 times the square root of 36, does that equal 18? So that's 3 times 6. Yes. Cha-ching, we are good to go. So that was pretty easy. All right, let's try this one. All right, so we're going to want to subtract the 2. Okay, so we get the square root of 4x plus 3 is equal to negative 7. Square both sides because it's a square root, so that's why we're squaring. We get 4x plus 3 is equal to 49. Remember, when you square, negative is always positive. Solve for the variable. $11.5. Now, don't just assume because your answer is a decimal that it's an extraneous solution. Okay? Don't assume that. Always check your work. So we're going to come back over here. Okay, and I'm going to put 11.5 in for x. Okay, so we get the square root of 46 plus 3, then plus 2 is equal to negative 5, big cold question mark, square root of 49, then plus 2, so 7 plus 2. I don't think that equals negative 5. Nope. All right, so that tells me that this 11.5 is not a solution. This is an extraneous. Okay, which means in this particular problem there is no solution. Okay, there isn't a number that we can put in for x that when we put it in we're going to get negative 5 as an answer. All right, let's try a couple more. So in this particular problem, we're going to take it to the 4th power because it's the 4th root. Okay, so let's take it to the 4th power. All right, so we get x, okay, x minus 4. What is negative 7 to the 4th power? Where's my calculator? All right. Again, please make sure you use parentheses if you're going to use your calculators. Oh, 2,401. Okay, so we're going to add 4. Okay, so I get 2,405. All right, so the 4th root of 2,405 minus 4, the big question is that equal negative 7? All right, so let's put our check over here. Okay, so this is the 4th root of 2,401. Question is does that equal -7? Okay, I get +7. All right, so that is not true. So again, no solution, extraneous solutions. Okay. All right, let's try 2 more because there's a couple of different things that could happen. All right, we saw 2 with no solutions. But what happens if we have a variable underneath the radical and on the outside of the radical? So we're still going to square both sides. Okay, so we're still doing that because this is a square root, so let's do that. Okay, so we get x squared equals -42 plus 13x. Looks like a quadratic. We're going to have to set that equal to 0. So x squared minus 13x plus 42 is equal to 0. You have choices again. You could factor or you could do quadratic formula. But I believe this factors. Factors of 42 are 6 and 7. So we get x minus 6, x minus 7. Solve both. So we get 6 and 7. The question is, are both a solution to the original problem? So we got to come back up here. And we do have to do both of them. All right, so let's put in 6. So does 6 equal the square root of -42 plus 13 times 6? Okay. I don't know what 13 times 6 is. 78. So 6 is equal to the square root of -42 plus 78. All right, I get 36. Okay, so that one works. All right, let's try 7. Okay. All right, 13 times 7, 91. All right, 49. Okay, so both are solutions to the original problem. Okay, so you may have to be doing some solving quadratics when you're doing this. All right, let's try one more. Again, our variable is inside and outside. Okay, so here, before we even do anything, we're going to have to add the 1. So we get the square root of x plus 3 is equal to x plus 1. Now we're going to have to square both sides. Okay, so we're going to have to do a little ouch here, because now we get x plus 3 is equal to x plus 1 quantity squared. Now remember, that means we're going to write it twice and multiply. So that becomes x plus 1 times x plus 1. So x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equal to x plus 3. All right, now it's a quadratic again, so we're going to want to set it equal to 0. So 0 is equal to x squared. I'm going to subtract the x, and I'm going to subtract the 3. So that's going to be plus x minus 2. And again, I think that factors. It does. Again, you have choices of factoring or quadratic formula. Set both equal to 0. We're going to get -2 and +1. Yes, you do need to check both solutions. Okay, so let's check -2. So you get the square root of -2 plus 3, then -1 is equal to -2. So the square root of 1 minus 1 equals -2, so that's 1 minus 1. Nope. I get 0 equals -2. So that is not a solution. Just going to use a lighter color there. All right, let's try 1. Okay, so we're going to get the square root of 1 plus 3, then minus 1 is equal to 1. So the square root of 1 plus 3, 4 minus 1 equals 1. So 2 minus 1 equals 1. So we get 1 equals 1. Yay! Okay, so 1 is a solution. Okay, so be aware you might have to do some foiling and everything else. All right, so you can pause the video and try the rest of the problems, or if you're comfortable, you can go right into the homework. Okay, so pause the video and let's check our answers. So here are your solutions to 1 and 3. Okay, they both worked. Okay, 5 and 7. Okay, I cubed both sides in 5. Squared both sides in 7 so that the radicals went away on both sides. And in 9, I had to add the square root of 2x plus 7 to both sides, then squared it, then solved it. And 5 is a solution. All right, please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, stay in to stay safe, guys, and have a great day.